All right, so Rurouni Kenshin, episode 21 of the new 2023 series. This one is the second part of the side story that they started in the last episode that I was very, very surprised that they were going to adapt in this anime, especially where they put it. But considering where this episode ends and the message that it kind of ends off on, it kind of makes a little bit more sense as to why it was placed here within the anime. That will lead into the prologue to the Kyoto arc, which will definitively start next week, with the episode title being Resurrection of the Wolf. It will finally begin. Also, I want to apologize for this video being a couple of days late. The episode came out on Thursday, which was Thanksgiving here in America, and though I didn't really have like a big family Thanksgiving, I still went out to dinner. And then I already planned to stream Alien Isolation pretty much all night, which is what I did. Yesterday I was busy all day, so I never had a chance to watch the episode until today, Saturday, 2 days later. So I apologize for that. I'm not stopping the Kenshin reviews. I just was way too busy and I didn't have time to sit down for 22 minutes and watch the episode. So I'm sorry about that, but here it is, just a little bit late for you guys. Now, I will say, continuing my thoughts and sentiments from last week, I am not as attached to this little side story in the manga because it wasn't part of the original manga run, which is what I am the hugest fan of. It was a side story that came out some years later, and although I was aware of it, I never went and read it myself, so this is really the first exposure that I had to it, and I think it's fine for a side story of Kenshin. You know, it shows one of the last things he did before he wound up in Tokyo and met Kaoru. And I think there is some nice parallels going on here between him and Dr. Elder, how they both want to use their abilities to kind of further the peace and further good things that are going to happen, hopefully in the future, while letting go of some of the traditions of the past. And that comes up with the villain in this episode also, Espiral, I think his name is. You know, it's a play on Spiral, which is like his sword, which every character in RUROUNI KENSHIN has a very specific, unique weapon to themselves and specific techniques. And this guy seems to be able to kind of use like a twisting momentum in order to make things spin and spiral, and that's kind of his whole thing. He's the spiral guy. He should read Uzumaki, I don't know. And although he basically is a one-note villain, they still managed to give him a decent amount of screen time and character development just in these little 2 episodes. He's not a character that's going to come back into play unless they create just crazy anime-only stuff, which I don't think they're going to do. But I like the idea that he was a hired gun, and you think that he's just sort of this evil hitman, but then you realize he wants to just test his skills against Kenshin, and he found a way to do it. He even apologized to Dr. Elder when he was basically like holding her up to holding her captive and saying like, Kenshin has to fight me or I'm going to hurt her. It was just kind of one of those things where it's like he's trying to draw Kenshin into a fight, and it gives him a little bit more characterization than rather than just being a simple, you know, mustache twirling villain. He's got a little bit more to him. Again, it's as much as you can do within 1 episode of a series, but I appreciated them trying to give him a little bit more personality and making him kind of as much of a fleshed out character as they could. The battle scene between him and Kenshin was also pretty good. Obviously, Kenshin absolutely smokes him. He stands no chance whatsoever, but his whole thing also is recognizing that the era of the sword is dwindling and no longer being around, and he wants to kind of keep it going. And through Kenshin's actions of showing his reverse blade sword, and there actually is a further flashback in this episode showing Kenshin when he first signed up to be the Batosai to fight in the revolution, which goes back to him having his reverse bladed sword here, because back then, the scene that we see, he's talking to 2 characters who are not revealed in the manga until we get into backstory stuff, so it's cool to kind of see them here, even though they were kind of shrouded in shadow, and they're not super, super important in the overall story of Kenshin, but they're very important to how Kenshin kind of began his journey as Batosai. And I like that it juxtaposes them asking if he's ever slain somebody before, and he says no, but I'm willing to do it to bring in a new peaceful era, right? So this is Kenshin before he had become the Hitokiri, before he was Batosai, basically agreeing to do so. And then we flash forward to the fight now, where Kenshin wins the battle and shows his opponent his reverse-bladed sword. Kind of, in a way, having that same mentality of like, this is what I'm going to use to bring forward a new era and hope that things can get better. When he was younger, he believed that killing was the way to do that. Now that he's older and he's gone through war and he's gone through this experience, he's saying, I want to protect as many people as I can with this reverse-bladed sword. I specifically crafted a weapon to stop me from killing people and to do things a different way, which in turn inspires the villain, Esperal, forgive me on the pronunciation of his name, to basically understand that swordsmanship won't die as long as he keeps it with him. He doesn't necessarily have to keep up the conflict and the battle and the killing if he improves his skill, if he improves his abilities, and if he keeps that with him as part of who he is, that is swordsmanship. And that will never die. That is something that the world, the era can't take away because it's part of him. In just the same way that it's part of Kenshin, swordsmanship is what he is, deep down. Like, that's who he is. He is a swordsman, and he always will be. But there's different ways that you can do that in order to incorporate it into the world that we live in now. Whereas now is no longer the time for killing as far as Kenshin is concerned because of everything that happened to him in his past that we will get to in the series eventually. He decided to try to do things a different way, which is why he has the reverse-bladed sword. So I like that flashback of showing Kenshin basically agreeing to become a Hitokiri in that moment, saying, I will use my sword to kill, to bring in a new era, and then showing with the reverse blade sword saying, I'm going to use this to protect this new era. So I thought that was really interesting. I also really loved the end of the episode, how Dr. Elder noticed the scar on Kenshin's face and attributed it to sword scars or scars from a blade that haven't really healed, which is very, very important to his character and that he carries around with him. Kenshin carries his past, like a really heavy weight, like a burden that is always around him. And the scar on his face is this endless reminder of what happened to him. And without giving away any spoilers, that specific cross-shaped scar plays deeply into the transition of the Kenshin of the past to the Kenshin that we know now. And because of him carrying that with him, it brings intense mental strain and stress upon him, which is something that the doctor noticed. And I thought that was clever because, she is the doctor character. So she notices that it's not just your physical ability, it's your mental strength too. Like, you are exhausted. That's why Kenshin couldn't smell the tea. Like, there's something going on inside of him. Like, he always has this kind of burden, this panic, this regret, this pain that he constantly carries with him everywhere that he goes. And that actually makes him even weaker sometimes than he potentially could be. It's not just all about physical strength and physical prowess. It's also about your mental health, right? And what I loved so much about this episode and how I really think it's a good place to put these episodes, even though it did take us away from, getting to the Kyoto arc that we want to get to. I think the end of this episode really encapsulates why they put it here, because the doctor tells him, if you manage to find some place where you can settle down for a while, if you can just sort of let yourself rest, let yourself experience that sense of calm, let yourself experience that sense of rest, let yourself enjoy something, rather than just wandering from place to place, which is what he's been doing for ever since the end of the war. He's just been kind of wandering from place to place. She's the one that initially sparks the advice to him that says, hey, if you just went to a new location, if you just settled down for a little while, if you just took a rest, you'd be able to find some kind of semblance of peace a little bit more than what you're finding now. And it's something that Kenshin took to heart. And I love that when it transferred back to the post-credit scene, when it showed Kenshin talking to his friends, that's exactly what he did. And Megumi, who is now the resident doctor, she talks about Kenshin's ability, his sense of smell and how he smelled the tea and if everything's all right with him. And that it's because he allowed himself to be opened up to friends, to opened up to a place to stay, perhaps full time, to kind of giving himself that freedom to experience that connection between people that he wasn't allowing himself to do before, just being a wanderer. And that he's found some kind of semblance of peace here at the Kamiya Dojo in Tokyo. And now setting that up, showing that he has found this place of peace and that it has effectively healed him right before we lead in to the chaos of the Kyoto arc, makes this make a whole lot of sense. But yeah, next week is when we get into the nitty-gritty stuff, and I can't wait to talk about it. The only detriment here is that there is only 3 more episodes left of the first season of RUROUNI KENSHIN. I really hope it gets a season 2 because things are going to ramp up like crazy now. We've had our introductions. We've met our characters. We know where they stand. We know their interactions together. We know what Kenshin means to them. We know what they mean to Kenshin. So now everything is primed and ready to start the chaos, and I can't wait for it myself. So I'll see you guys next week. Anyways, if you liked the review, please give it a thumbs up and a comment to help it out in the algorithm. It really will help me out. And if you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I do have a Patreon, channel memberships, merch store, all that stuff linked in the description below. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time.